Hi, I am Charlie McManus. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a sophomore majoring in advertising, public relations, and media studies. My research is about improving the experience of trans computer science majors through better data collection and implementation. My research advisor is the incredible Dr. Andrea Herrera, who has supported me and helped me immensely. I truly couldn't have asked for a better advisor and mentor, and I'm thankful for all they've done in helping me. For a bit of background about my experience with my topic, I have been coding since around the age of 12. Throughout middle and high school, I had the opportunity to be involved in a lot of educational programs around supporting women in STEM, including Code with Posse and Girls Who Code. I've also been a huge advocate for supporting gender-marginalized people in STEM, and have taught multiple coding classes to students. Needless to say, I'm very passionate about this topic and excited to share more about what I've learned from my own research about improving trans computer science majors' experience in college. Some key terms I would like to define are SERU, trans, and CS. SERU is a yearly survey for all undergraduate students called Student Experience in the Research University, or SERU, the results of which are published in interactive visualizations by UO's Office of Institutional Research. This survey is important because of the valuable data it has with specifically gender markers outside of male and female. CS is an acronym for computer science. And finally, trans, as I use it in this presentation and my research, is as an umbrella term representing anyone who identifies outside of cis male or female. This can include trans women or men, non-binary people, genderqueer people, and more. This is a timeline of what my research looked like. I'm going to dive deeper into each part in the next couple of slides, so I won't be staying on here for too long, but wanted to share the bigger picture of what it looked like here. During the process, we started off by asking how we can improve retention for gender-marginalized STEM majors. Within that time, we started by picking 12 schools to look at. As we began to contact all 12 schools, we decided to focus on just computer science majors to cut down our question and focus better on our goals. Then, as we received data, we noticed the importance of the SERU data. This data seemed unique to UO compared to the other schools we looked at because it represented students outside of just male and female, which was quite uncommon compared to other data we'd found. Because of this and the lack of research that includes trans students, we tilted our focus to this data and how to use it to support students at UL. This led us to take a deeper look into the data presented by this survey and find a lot of missing pieces that we needed for our research. Because of this, we contacted the owners of the survey looking for more in-depth data that we could use to better visualize how trans CS majors feel at UL. I'm very grateful that we were able to get this data from them. The first part of this research was picking out the universities I would compare to UL. I ended up randomly picking 11 different schools that are peer institutions to the University of Oregon. One major goal I had when randomly picking these universities was making sure I diversified where the schools were from. Because I had such a small sample size, I wanted to make sure I was looking at universities from all different states. What I ended up doing was compiling a list of all states represented in the UO's peer institution list. I then would randomly generate a state. Then, with all the universities within that state, I would randomly generate one of them to be the university represented in that state. This process made it so it was still random, but more fair since some states had a much larger list of colleges in the state than others. In the end, I ended up with 5 private schools, 5 public schools, 1 regional, and 1 national school, all from 11 different states. Next, I contacted all 12 schools, asking for computer science and engineering retention data. Preferably, I was looking for data that represented more than just male and female, but I was happy with anything the university could give me. When collecting this data, 1 university completely didn't respond. 5 universities said they could not give me any data. 2 universities said that they did not have that data, and 4 universities gave me some kind of data. What we noticed because of the data we received was how unique and valuable UO's SERU data is. It was unique in having gender markers outside of male and female and gave students an opportunity to communicate how they felt they are being represented and treated at UO as a whole and in their specific major. This is important in our research because it is a way to actually see representation in the data that schools have about their students. It also gave the opportunity for UO to focus on supporting students who may typically be ignored and marginalized and give them representation and data that can help support these students better. When going through the SARA data, looking specifically at how trans CS majors felt about inclusivity and diversity on campus, we had a setback because most of the questions had been divided in a way where you could only see the answers based on gender or major, but not both, which limited the use and value of these questions in general, but also specifically for the research. Another setback we had was within gender itself, because the gender options were male, female, non-binary, prefer not to answer, and prefer to self-describe. This limited our ability to specifically focus on trans students when looking at the data, which means we had to focus more on non-binary students' answers and hope in the future the form may ask more specific questions about gender to help give more opportunities to visualize data within students. But when we contacted the owner of this form about our research and requested more specific data regarding questions that were missing either student's major or gender from the form, I was able to receive that, which I'm very glad that was something they could do. For directions for future research, I plan to contact relevant offices, including the Dean of Students and the Department of Computer Science, regarding info that should be shared with them from the SARA data. Make this data more accessible to students by sharing it in places students see, and have recommendations to the Office of Institutional Research about ways to make the SARA data more inclusive and helpful for the school. I plan to contact and hold meetings with the relevant offices to my research, including the Dean of Students and the Computer Science Department, sharing this data with these departments and highlighting the gender disparities and how these students feel about inclusion and support as a CS major. From my understanding, this info isn't currently being shared with specific departments. But even if it is, I think when sharing this data, it is my priority to make sure trans students are the highlight of the research and a focal point when looking at this data. When sharing this data with the computer science department, my goal is to make it clear that they are aware of any disparities within the CS student body, and if there is or isn't change around this topic, it is not for lack of resources and insight on what students need. My next goal is to make the data more accessible for students by sharing it with them through social media posts and posters on campus, and creating a community for trans CS majors to learn about and connect with each other around this topic. I hope to spread this data to students in easily accessible ways that make this data more digestible and highlight the portions that may be easily missed. While this data is publicly available to students, actually going through it is less likely. I want to make sure students have this data in mind when they are going through their programs because it can give them a reminder that they are not the only ones who feel that way. I also hope to create ways to connect these students who feel passionately about this data and what it means for the CS department, because I think that student advocacy is very important, and the more voices you have speaking about a shared topic, the more pressure there is to create change. SARA data on gender was divided by male, female, non-binary, prefer not to answer, prefer to self-describe, and no answer given. These categories are relatively comprehensive as compared to the gender data collected by UO's peer institutions, but there are some problems. The first being that non-binary students get easily forgotten in the data visualization because of their relatively small numbers as compared to students of other gender groups. However, when focusing on non-binary students' responses, they showed lower satisfaction with the campus climate for diversity and inclusion as compared to male and female students. Secondly, the gender categories male and female in the SARA data are problematic for analyzing trans students' experience because it is unclear which students are cisgender or transgender in the framework. Furthermore, those who prefer to self-identify are all collapsed into one gender group, which may include students who do and do not fall under the trans umbrella. In the future, I suggest UO ask students more specific questions about their gender. Currently, you are not Currently, you cannot differentiate specifically how trans students feel about diversity on campus from how cis students feel about diversity on campus. Secondly, I believe if the Office of Institutional Research shared a detailed list of where this data had been shared across campus, then it would be more accessible for students to advocate and expect change from their departments rather than not be sure if their department is aware of this data. Then finally, these are my references. And that is it for me. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about my research.